That was a golf clap. Come on, folks. I'm just teasing. It's great to see you. Thank you very much, Claude. Thank you, Anna, for your terrific and tireless work in facilitating this Senate Human Rights Caucus. I am grateful to Senator Thom Tillis of North Carolina, who has been a stalwart co-chair. We have done a lot in the last Congress, and we are very hopeful we will do much more together in this Congress. Senator Tillis wishes he could be with us right now. He has been pulled into a 2:30 hearing. Unfortunately, I also have a 2:30 hearing. He's doing some pre-hearing conversations that have prevented him from joining us, and he wanted me to convey his personal best regards to Mrs. McCain and to all of you, his thanks for your coming to today's Human Rights Caucus event. To my dear friend Claude Fondheim, thank you for participating in and facilitating this panel, and to both Jean and to Neha, thank you for your leadership, your work, your passion, and the difference that you've made around the world. There's about 40 million people, by some estimates, enduring slavery around the world today. It is still surprising to me how many Americans are surprised that slavery is a widespread feature of modern life. How many Americans think that this is something that was done away with because our own nation legally abolished it quite some time ago now, and who don't recognize that there are people living in human slavery in the United States today. So I am grateful for all of you who have dedicated your time and your heart and your effort to first just raising awareness, helping people who are our fellow citizens, our fellow Americans, recognize that this is a real and a pressing and a genuine challenge, that forced labor, that forced marriage, that sexual exploitation in conditions that can only be described as slavery are tragically commonplace around the globe. This is also something that affects all of us, because any time there is a human being who's living in conditions of slavery, the consequences of that affect all of us, not just because of supply chains or the ways it contributes to instability or insecurity, but because it's an offense against our God-given rights to individual liberty and to freedom. It's something that we fought a tragic and bloody war over. It's something that has defined the United States in its modern age, that we are a country that stands for human rights and for individual liberty. And nothing is a more fundamental affront to that principle than the fact that slavery continues here in the United States, and that slavery continues around the world. So what, if anything, have we done about this? Since the enactment of the Trafficking Victims Protection Act of 2000, which established human trafficking as a federal crime and created the Office to Monitor and Combat Trafficking in Persons, we, through our State Department, both overseas and then through federal law enforcement here at home, have continued to respond in a bipartisan and robust way to the global scourge of slavery. We've passed several reauthorizations of the TVPA, including at the end of 2018. We've also passed bills such as Senator Rob Portman's Stop Enabling Sex Traffickers Act, which work to target those websites in the United States, in particular, that were facilitating prostitution, sexual slavery, and sex trafficking. And the fiscal year 2017 National Defense Authorization Act included an authorization of grants to end modern slavery, now being leveraged through the Global Fund to End Modern Slavery, to secure additional grants from other governments and from private donors. As you can see from today's event, from the hosting senators and from the folks who are participating in this, this is a genuinely bipartisan issue. This is something that speaks deeply to shared American values that both Republicans and Democrats are passionate about fighting here in the United States and around the world. We also agree that it's important for Congress in a bipartisan and bicameral way to stand up for human rights. Human rights issues cut across jurisdictions and issues and committees. And I value the work of the Tom Lantos Human Rights Commission in the House of Representatives and this Senate Human Rights Caucus for bringing members of different backgrounds, different partisan perspectives together to highlight human rights violations that continue and their role in American foreign policy and their role at the head of the list of the things that define us as a nation and that should be at the top of the list of the concerns or interests we raise around the world. Last year, we lost a true, dedicated, and tireless champion to human rights, not just here in his service in the Senate, but in his life and in his work around the world. Someone who dedicated himself to fighting torture and unjust detention, to shining a light on human rights abuses, and who traveled tirelessly around the globe. And every country he went to, he made sure that he was meeting with advocates, that he was pressing whether a country was our enemy or ally, that he was demanding accountability around human rights, and he was an absolutely tireless voice in the Senate for lifting up human rights. I had the blessing of traveling with Senator John McCain to a number of different places, to Vietnam and Singapore, to Afghanistan and Egypt, to Jordan, to refugee camps, and to meetings with heads of state and foreign capitals. I've never seen a man more tirelessly filled with energy, determined to use every last minute and every last breath he had to lift up the cause of freedom. And my time with him in Vietnam, on the last trip that we took together, is something I will never forget. I'm honored to be here today with Mrs. Cindy McCain, a champion in her own right of human rights issues, a person who has tirelessly dedicated herself to the work against human trafficking and to United States global leadership, but who is also in part here to honor the legacy of her husband. Just today, I've introduced in the Senate a resolution co-sponsored by Senator Tillis, as well as Senators Merkley, Markey, Rubio, and Sinema, to establish the John S. McCain III Human Rights Commission here in the Senate, of equal standing and status with the Tom Lantos Human Rights Commission in the House. A commission that would have dedicated funding and staff to carry on his life's work of tirelessly promoting human rights. I only hope that it deserves his name, that we can swiftly enact it, that we can enact this legislation and then use this platform as a way to continue our work of trying in some small way to pay tribute to the legacy that he leaves behind of being one of America's most forceful and most effective advocates for human rights. So, thank you all for joining us today for this important discussion. I look forward to hearing the recommendations of the panelists and continuing to work with all of you to stand up for human rights. And if I might, Claude, I think I'll introduce Mrs. McCain. Can I? Ladies and gentlemen, it's a real honor for us today to have present with us the chair of the Board of Trustees of the McCain Institute for International Leadership at Arizona State University. She and her husband, John, had 3 children together and a 4th daughter whom they adopted from Bangladesh. She serves as the chair of the McCain Institute's Human Trafficking Advisory Council and co-chair of the Arizona Governor's Advisory Council on Human Trafficking. She holds an undergraduate degree and master's in special education from the University of Southern California and is the chairman of a successful business and someone who, frankly, in my travels with her and my time with her, has touched my heart and really come to be a dear and good and close friend, as long as you promise never to share the photographs of the 2 of us in an African village where we were both draped in ceremonial garb that was 2 or 3 sizes too large for either of us, a truly cherished memory. So, Mrs. McCain, thank you so much for gracing us with your presence today. We look forward to your remarks.
Thank you very much. I'm so pleased to be here today. Senator Coons, as he mentioned, we are good friends and have had the opportunity to travel together and to experience things in Africa and around the world. And I know no better champion for not only human rights, but just the dignity and respect that all human beings deserve. And especially your work in Africa, which is such a difficult subject anyway. He knows no bounds in trying to help preserve human rights, help keep human rights, help keep women safe and children safe on the continent of Africa. I'm grateful for your friendship. Thank you. Before I give to my prepared remarks, what I'd like to say that I am so excited right now in this time with regards to human trafficking because we finally have a seat at the table. People are talking about human trafficking, modern-day slavery. You go to dinner, you talk about it at the dinner table. You go to friends' houses, you go talk about it there. You talk about it to the guy on the bus next to you. It may be anywhere, but we're talking about it. And that was not the case 5 years ago. This was not something that was even referred to in polite, quote, polite company, although I did. But and along with that came, I know in my own state and some other states, the removal of the word prostitution as it applies to a child. A child can never be a prostitute. So the fact that states are now recognizing the importance of language and what language does with regards to this issue is extremely important. And finally, on just this little portion, our Native Americans, our Indian reservations, et cetera. We finally have an Amber Alert system up there. We have working councils that are actually concentrating on protecting their young girls from being kidnapped and enslaved around the world. And more importantly, they understand the benefit to doing just this because it benefits everybody in the tribe. So those are the three things that I've been very excited about with regards to human trafficking. Like I said, it's an honor to be here with such a distinguished group of experts and leaders who have truly made a difference in moving the needle on the fight against human trafficking. I want to thank especially the co-chairs of the Senate Human Rights Caucus, Senator Coons, Senator Tillis, for hosting today's discussion, for all the critical human rights issues they champion. I also want to thank Senator Portman for his long-standing commitment to seeing this crime of human trafficking eradicated. Before I focus on today's issue of modern slavery, I want to say that the work of defending human rights at home and around the world is more critical now than it ever has been. My husband believed deeply, as I believe, that our strength as a nation lies in our values, that moral concerns must be an essential part of our domestic and foreign policy. As he wrote, human rights advocacy isn't naive idealism, it's the truest kind of realism. We face no shortages of crises in the world, but we must continue to stand up for the inalienable and universal rights of all. In a time of division, human rights ought to be the ultimate common ground. Additionally, my family is deeply honored by the efforts of Senator Coons and Senator Tillis to establish the John S. McCain Human Rights Commission. He would be so honored, I can't tell you. By creating this commission, the Senate will take on John's commitment to human rights in perpetuity. He would be proud to know these just causes will continue to be fought in his name. One human rights cause near and dear to my heart is the issue of human trafficking, as I mentioned. Many years ago on a trip to India, I came face to face with this dark issue. This one experience was so unsettling to me that when I returned home, I set my mind to not only learn what it was, but find out if there were any actionable steps that I could take. It's one of the most pressing human rights issues of our time. Today, the McCain Institute for International Leadership is making significant strides to combat human trafficking in my own home state of Arizona, across the United States, and globally. As the chair of the McCain Institute, I have endeavored to alleviate the discourse about human trafficking and modern-day slavery as my top priority. The McCain Institute's human trafficking team has developed serious programmatic work to combat all forms of human trafficking. In Arizona, I'm directly involved, as was mentioned, as the co-chair of the Governor's Human Trafficking Task Force. In Texas, we are working with the Howard G. Buffett Foundation to address forced labor in the agriculture sector. Nationally, our team is working with the National Network of Youth to train runaway and homeless youth service providers on how to work with the youth who are at risk or have experienced exploitation. Additionally, this year, we will launch a justice sector initiative with our partners to increase investigations and prosecutions related to human trafficking in the United States. And globally, we are working with universities and college campuses to train the next generation of advocates and activists to alleviate the discourse about how to eliminate forced labor from global supply chains. We cannot do this work alone. This is why I am most grateful to Senator Tillis and Senator Coons for hosting this briefing today. And together we can and must take meaningful action to bring about serious and sustained solutions to prevent and eradicate human trafficking. I thank you, and I'm going to enjoy the panel as all of you will. Thank you for having me today.